RM Sotheby's is the world's largest collector car auction house by total sales. They are the preeminent market maker of high-quality collector cars and collections, regardless of size or complexity. By working in partnership with the Sotheby's team and its network of 80 offices in 40 countries, RM Sotheby's has established the largest client network of any collector car auction house in the world. Join the RM Sotheby's family by connecting with one of their car specialists at rmsotheby's.com or contact me directly at gstanley@rmsotheby's.com. LLC TLC is here to save you money on all of your vehicle purchases. LLC TLC will permanently register your classic cars in Montana to avoid any annual renewal fees. As your registered agent, they will handle everything for you so you never have to step foot in Montana. And as a listener of this podcast, LLC TLC is offering 30% off your entire package. Simply go to llctlc.com/classic or mention this podcast when you contact LLC TLC directly. All right, welcome to the Collector Car Podcast. This is part 2 of the Hershey Fall Special, and I'd like to welcome Jake O'Gorman. Jake, how you doing, buddy?
Good to be here.
Yeah, you're a returning guest. Is this your second time or your third time? I'm not quite sure.
Could be.
I'm going to say third.
Always feels like the first time with you, Greg. Having a great time.
All right. Well, that's great. Great answer. I love that. So you're one of the auction managers for RM Sotheby's, and we're going to cover just a handful of cars here to kind of talk about the big sale coming up, because there's a lot of cool stuff happening. And I recently put an email out to my followers about how difficult it can be to get a car into auction. And now sometimes that's because all the spaces get filled fairly quickly. Sometimes it's because we can't arrive on the exact correct terms. Sometimes it's just that's not a great auction for that kind of car. And I thought, as a nice follow-up, if you could kind of give us a little bit of insight in how cars are selected for Hershey, like kind of the process, in dealing with the car specialist, because I know there's a limited number of spots, correct?
Correct. And this year is actually the largest Hershey we have. We've had with the amount of private collections and individual consignments.
Okay, so what number is that? Is that 100 cars? Is that 1,000 cars?
Yeah, I'd love to be 1,000 cars, but no, we're a little over 160 lots with everything in the sale, and typically we're around 65 to 70 lots per night, like car lots, but we're actually over that this year, and the reason for that is every auction's different, but Hershey, we have a limited number of physical spots to park cars, both in the parking lot, in the parking garage, under tents, and we just physically don't have the space to accommodate 200 cars, or else we could do 200. We just don't have the real estate for it at the lodge.
So that means that those 160 spots are prize spots, right? So you have to be pretty selective in the cars that you bring in. In my little newsletter, I compared it to musical chairs. Like some of these big auction houses, they have enough chairs for everybody, so any kid could grab a chair, right, when the music stops. But for us, it can be pretty tight. And I had hoped to have like 10 cars in this sale, but we closed so early because we got some good collections in. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, that's right. And you either have to be very early, or be a large collection to kind of get those spots at a sale like this. And typically we're consigning cars during Monterey in August and just after, in order to fill a Hershey type sale. But this year we, between the remainder of the Adderley collection, the Charles Noto, the William Boucher, the Frank Wright collection, there's just a lot of collections that came in fairly early on in the process that took up all those spots.
So what I'm hearing from you is, if you want to consign for Scottsdale, call your car specialist today, right?
Correct. Like earlier the better. I actually already, it's not announced yet, but I have a group for Monterey next year already that I'm photographing in 2 weeks.
Are you taking up my spots for next year now?
All of them. All of them.
Oh my gosh. All right. You're killing me, man. All right.
But
So
yeah.
so let's talk about those collections. Are these typically estate kind of collections? Are they sometimes people just want to transition their, all right, we're done with pre-war, we want to try something new? Is it a mix of both?
It is definitely a mix of both. And, the obviously the Adderley collection, he passed away in 2018, and they've been selling off different pieces of cars and memorabilia over,
Right.
the last 7 years.
While we're talking, I'm going to pull up some of the Adderley collection so people can see what we're talking about here.
Perfect. Yeah. So this one is an estate collection, and it's coming from a trust that he set up. And as they've gone along, they've been, selling off packages of cars each year, but combining that with they've donated quite a number of cars to the Gilmore Museum,
Okay.
and the
Yep.
CCCA Museum in Hickory Corners, Michigan. So it's sort of a mix, and like anything, didn't want to put everything on the market at one time, just as it made sense. Sell off pieces, but this is the last group.
Okay, so what year or how long ago did we start? Because what was it, Monterey 2 years ago we started with this collection?
Yep. So Monterey 22 was the first group of cars from them. Started with 7, 8 cars, and it kind of floated around the number 7 to 10 cars. We'd sell for them in batches at auctions that made sense, right? Wherever we thought they would fit the best. And this last group, just with the value that it is and the types of cars, Hershey made the most sense. It's all, for the most part, except for I think one kind of a Ferrari, right, in the kind of the 70s,
Right.
and the IndyCar there. Most of it is pre-war, early American European things that are kind of in that 100 to 300 range. So
Right.
that's sort of the sweet spot for the Hershey sale. And then we do have like $500,000, $700,000 cars, but sort of the highest transacting things are in that sub 300 range at Hershey.
Yeah, and if you're watching online, I've scrolled through some of their, it's 2 pages of stuff, a lot of automobilia,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of really cool cars, and it just speaks to the quality of the collection if this is what remains. So pretty much everything beyond this was really big stuff, right?
Yeah, so from very like custom bodied Duesenberg Model J's that were selling north of $4 million to Stutzes that were in that million to 2 million kind of range, big pre-war, special bodied, great history, matching numbers type things. So really good things. And Ferrari Daytonas, and there's a pre-war Alpha 6C 1750
Right, big stuff
that
sold,
we had
yeah.
too. So yeah, so big stuff, and not saying that stuff wouldn't fit at Hershey. It's the same type of car, but it made sense at the time to put them at a Monterey, at a Amelia, and then now Miami type sale.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't want to spend too much time on this one collection,
Yeah.
but there is a lot of affordable collector cars at Hershey. So as I'm kind of scrolling through this, we've got a 58 Ford Thunderbird convertible, estimates 30 to 50, offered without a reserve. Obviously, it looks like everything from the Adderley collection is without reserve. Is that correct?
There's about 5 that have reserves on them.
Okay.
And like with any, they have reserves on them, but they're also priced like
To sell.
Right. To sell, right? And appropriately. So it's not sometimes when we are working on consigning cars and we're thinking about what goes into a sale, a reserve is a reserve should be there to work against, right? And to make sure that there's there's sort of a floor on the car, right? Just in case the right guy doesn't show up on the day. But also you want to price it to where it gets people interested in it. I mean,
Sure. Yeah.
like for for example, that 31 Chrysler dual cowl Phaeton is, we had one in Monterey, an older restoration, but very comparable car. And I think it did all in, like with hammer 260. And that car is priced right in the middle of that, right? 200 to 300 grand. And I already have 4 bidders on that particular car.
Right.
Like this far out. So it's priced to where it makes sense, and we know it's going to transact, and we have enough people to where it's going to be an auction.
Right. Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's start off. Yeah. So you're the reason I only got one car in Hershey's, because you got the Adderley collection. I'm sure some other cool stuff. All right. I get it. All right. Well, let's start with the first night. We've got the Sportsman collection. Now, are those all Woodies? I did pull up one specific car, 1947 Ford Super Deluxe Sportsman convertible, estimate 130 to 150. Is that what the Sportsman collection is? A bunch of cool Woodies?
Yep. So it's all Woodies and all no reserve. So they are all changing hands in Hershey.
Okay. Now, isn't this, take the Woody part out of it, but isn't this the car from Karate Kid, Mr. Miyagi, that, what's his name, had the wax on, wax off? Or was that a 46 Ford?
It may have been 46. I'm sorry if I'm of the generation. I haven't seen Karate Kid.
Oh my gosh! All right, look at that. Learning more about Jake every day.
So,
okay.
Yeah, that's hey. If I have to have a flaw, that's one. It's one. All
right, so we got some great Woodies coming from that collection. The next is the Frank Wright collection. Now, tell us a little bit about this. And I picked 2 cars because they're pretty stellar cars, and they're just slightly different enough. I think the average person would be like, isn't that the same car? So I've got a 1932 Chrysler CL Imperial convertible Roadster, and then I have a 1931 Chrysler CG Imperial Roadster. So if you would talk a little bit about the collection as a whole, and then these 2 cars specifically, if you could.
For sure. So the Frank Wright was like the Chrysler guy. Like if you did not want to go up against his cars in CCCA, that's Classic Car Club of America, judging. If you went up against his cars, you were losing. You were coming in second. You were not getting 100 points. He was the guy. He was the guy, and he was very fanatical about using the correct bolts, washers, wire ends, like all the little details to make sure they were perfect, and in some cases maybe better than factory condition. Like beautiful restorations, and these restorations are over 20, 25 years old, 35 years old.
Wow.
They're old restorations in the world of restorations, but they've held up beautifully. So that's sort of a testament to how thorough and how well he did took care of these cars, to where they, there's cars that were restored 15 years ago that already have, paint flaws, and the leather looks old and the top looks bad, but these are beautiful, beautiful things. So he was one of the, experts in these cars, and, you can, the testament to his knowledge is just how these cars present.
Just flipping through these pictures now, this is the 32 CL Imperial, estimates 550 to 650. They just, like you said, you could have told me this was restored last week, and I probably would have agreed with you, just because it's such a stunning, it's really held up well. So can you speak to the differences between these 2 cars? Because, for the untrained eye, they look very similar, but the estimates are about $100,000 off.
Yeah. So, Chrysler really came into its own like 31 and then into 32. You can see they got just a little more fuller as a car, with the shape of the tops, the windows. I think they just became like a bigger, more kind of classic era car. Whereas the 31, it doesn't have side windows. It's a Roadster, right? It no side windows.
Yep.
Top really keeps the sun off you. Like, you're gonna get wet if you run in the rain in that thing. Whereas the 32, the CL, I think they call it a convertible Roadster, and that was every company had their own nomenclature for what they called convertible coupes, or true
Right.
convertible coupes with side windows. This has side windows. It's a little has a little bit kind of more formal or like a little bit bigger features on it compared to the 31, and that's what kind of makes it, I think, a little more elegant compared to the 32 is a little more elegant compared to the 31 because it has a little more fleshed out features on it.
Gotcha.
Just
Okay.
in, like even the hood sides, right? The 31 has these louvered hood sides, which are very sporty, lightweight, whereas the 32 has actual little vent doors that you can pop
Right.
open. So it's a
Gotcha.
little more like formal or kind of fleshed out, bigger of a car than the 31.
Okay. All right. That's cool. I was really curious because I'm like, all right, well, I can tell a difference between the two. And like you said, the window inserts, that's a big difference. That defines it more as a Roadster, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. All right. Awesome. Thanks for educating us. Now, the next one I want to just touch on is the William Boucher. Is how you pronounce it? Collection?
Boucher.
Boucher. All right. So tell me a little bit about that collection. I know I've got this stunning 1956 Cadillac Eldorado Biarritz. You got to roll your R's.
Mm-hmm.
Biarritz.
Yep.
Estimates 175 to 250. Now, this is the single headlight version, which was 56, 57,
Mm-hmm.
58. You went to the dual or quad headlights, depending on how you say it. And this one's stunning. Black over black. Tell us a little bit about this collection and what he specialized in, I guess.
Yeah, so William and Charles Noto, which is the other collection, they actually shared a building in Long Island, and William Boucher, he had AA. His thing was AACA award-winning 50s American cars. So whether that be Cadillac, Packard, Chrysler, that's what he loved. Some of the cars he had done, other cars he had bought and preserved or brought up some and maintained them. All his
Yep.
cars, same with Noto, with the Charles Noto collection, they're friends, and they would drain all the gas, drain all the oil, leave a little bit in, and then rotate the tires and like keep them up on jack stands because they preserved them. But they didn't just park them. They made sure they ran, they operated, then they pickled them basically.
Right.
And in advance of the sale, we sent our mechanics out. They've also have their own mechanic on site. Fresh batteries, fresh gas, make sure the brakes work, rebuild. Just do everything that it needs so it can run and drive and perform. So they're very good cars. This particular car, like, all the headlights work, the top works, it has the parade boot. I drove it. It was about a quarter mile away from the collection where we photographed these cars and drove all of them. Happy,
Nice.
Seems to be happy cars. So yeah, he really took good care of these things, and it was his hobby. And unfortunately, so you're talking about estate versus, how do these things come to us? This gentleman had passed away, William had passed away, but his friend, Charles Noto, that's who decided that it was time to sell his collection, and his friend had passed away, so he's like, well, they're in the same building, let's just do it all at once. And they had been coming to Hershey for decades to our auction.
Oh, that's cool. Wow. I hate to hear
So
him
cool.
passing away, but it's always good to have a plan. And it sounds like they had a great partnership in collecting these cars for so many years. Is that a record player? What is that underneath the dash on this car?
That's actually
AC?
I believe
Oh, it is.
that to
It's
be
AC.
AC. Yeah,
Oh, you don't see that very
so
often.
the other one, we'll get to it. There's another car in here too that has
Oh, yeah. Let's get it.
a
So
factory AC.
1960, it's
The
nice,
Seville.
1960 Chrysler 300F convertible, one of my favorites, 120 to 150, the most expensive Chrysler offered for 1960. So this is also from the same collection, correct?
Yep, same collection from the William Boucher collection, and same thing. This one, I don't believe it's not a AACA award-winning car, but it is of the same quality of the other cars that he had in his collection. So, like, beautiful top side, underside, runs great. It all works. Yeah, it's a very nice car, and typically, these things, seeing them being sold without reserve is exciting because this is trading hands. It's going home to a new person, and again, AC car. It has I love the setup of the cross ramp intake on these.
Oh yeah,
I think it's so cool.
Yep.
On the on the engine there, it's a cool feature. And the dash pod too. I think is always
so iconic.
A cool look. Yeah.
And for those who are audio only, this is a kind of a white car with light tan interior, almost a cream interior, and you can see the AC vents for a convertible, 1950s convertible AC vents on the top and down underneath the driver's side dash there. I just always love these cars. You got the big fins out back. It's just such an iconic styling car. All right, well, we're going to end with a few cars that are not in a collection. The first is, I just think this is a cool car. Let me start with the Underslung. So this is a 1913 American Underslung Model 34A Tourist. Now this is 175 to 225, and it's a beautiful light blue color with, I think it's black interior. But if you would talk a little bit about American Underslung and why is it called an Underslung? Because if you're looking at the car, it's just a really cool looking, almost, I don't want to say gangster car, but it's a very slick looking car.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the reason why they call it an underslung is the axles are actually over top of the frame rather than underneath the frame. So traditional car, your axles are underneath, you have your leaf springs or however they're attached to the frame's above, and they're usually pretty tall. So comparable cars of the period are going to be kind of tall, like very high, from like the driver's perspective, you're up high, whereas this is actually it's underslung. So axles are above the frame. It almost looks like, if you look at the front of it, the frame horns are upside down. It's almost like they flipped the frame upside down and then put the car body on it.
Yeah, you can see it right up front between the front tires here. And the first time I saw one of these, they said, be sure you look at the front fenders because it's either just about to the same height of the hood or not above it, but they're usually right there, and that really speaks to it. Think about a hood being the same height as your front fenders.
And your wheels being, they look extra tall because they're kind of at like the body line on the side of the hood. It makes it look very slick and almost like lowered.
Yeah, if this wasn't a four-door, would you call this a tourist, but a Phaeton?
Sure.
Or no, there's no inserts at all.
Yeah, it'd be a touring. So like teens, you call it a touring car or tourister, as they called it. Phaeton's like you're kind of more in the
30s.
Once you get into late, like very, very late 20s, 29, and the end of the 30s.
Yeah, this is just such a cool car. Awesome. All right, well, next, I think we're going to talk about the big car, the big dollar car for our auction, the 1935 Auburn Boattail Speedster, correct? Now, this is a supercharged 851, estimates 750 to 850. This is 1935. I could see Batman driving this back in the 30s, right? This thing's pretty wicked. Black with ox blood interior, something to that effect.
Great colors on it, and very, sinister looking car. You have to think what else was running around on American roads in 1935, and this looks like something much more European. Doesn't look like something that was built in the Midwest.
Yeah, for sure. Right. Now, have you driven this car?
I haven't driven this one yet. I've driven similar ones, like other 35 Auburns, and they're very fun cars to drive. They make some fun noises with the supercharger on it. They actually, so surprisingly, the previous generation Auburn Boattails, which we do have one in the sale, these have twice as much room to fit in them, and
Really? Because they don't look like they have a lot of room.
they don't, but they honestly do. So we had one in Monterey, a boat tail speedster, and I was showing it to a client that he is 6'3", and he fit in it with the top up with his hat on.
Oh my goodness! Wow. Okay.
like they actually have they're surprisingly a lot more room than you would think for how big the car is. So the cabin space is nice. So for something to drive and tour and play around with, you're going to have a lot better time in something like this than an earlier Auburn boat tail, if that's what you want to do.
I will say, I mean, in the pictures, the car does look massive, but then you look at the interior pictures, it looks super tight. I mean, it's such a big car for being a two-seater, but it is just stunningly gorgeous. I usually don't like black cars, and as a general rule of thumb, but I really like the way this one looks and the shapes of it. Now, it's supercharged. Is it only the supercharged that had the coil exhaust coming out of the side, or however you say that? Is that only the supercharged?
Yeah. So, yep. So it's funny. I believe all of them were supercharged except for one, and we've sold it. We've sold it and offered it a few times. There's a blue one that's out there that now that was the only factory ordered new non-supercharged Auburn boat tail speedster like this generation. And but yeah, all the other ones have these pipes, and that's sort of their iconic look, right? Is having the pipes coming out of the exhaust side of the engine, just so it's like a clearance item, right? Because the supercharger is sitting right there on the left side.
So this makes for an interesting. I know the answer. So, take the Lexus LFA, one of my favorite examples. You've got the Nürburgring option that nobody wanted, right? And now it doubles the price of the car. So I would make the argument that the non-supercharged boat tail speedster is the option no one wanted, but I'm pretty sure it didn't double the price of the car, right?
No, and who knows? Maybe time will change the Nürburgring package, but yeah, it's not. The look of the boat tail is those pipes on it, right?
Yeah.
And that's it's a super cool look. It's yes, the other one is symmetrical in its appearance on both sides, right. But being asymmetrical is a little more interesting.
It is, in my opinion. Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We just have, I think, 3 more. We won't necessarily spend as much time on each as we did on this one. This next one is the 1970 Plymouth Roadrunner Superbird. Again, offered without reserve, $125,000 to $175,000, 446-pack V8. They call it, I think it's Toro Red, but honestly, it looks orange to me. This reminds me of Poppy Red with Mustangs. It looks a little orange. Tell us about this car. I know you're a pre-war guy, but do you like the big muscle cars too?
So this is the kind of stuff. Obviously, this is like top of the pile, but this is the stuff that I was exposed to growing up, right? This was, what was on, TV, muscle car restoration shows, cruise nights. There was, tributes to this type of car, but not the real thing like this, with a matching numbers engine and the pistol grip transmission. It's a super cool thing. I mean, 16-year-old me would be all over it. But unfortunately I was spoiled by, learning about the pre-war cars and the concourse circuit. But yeah, it's a super cool thing. It's shows off what they were thinking in or trying for aerodynamics then, right? And kind of showing that direct line between like NASCAR and more production car. It's a cool thing. There's one that lives up here. So I'm in the Blenheim office. There's one in Toronto that we service. They bought from us, and we service it and work on it. So it's actually here right now, and it is pretty cool to see. I mean, you can't you're gonna smile when you look at it, right? Especially if you hear the horn beep.
Yeah. I don't know which I would prefer, Daytona or Superbird. I have a friend of mine. He has one of each, and most people don't know this, but the wings are significantly different, the angle and shape of them. Even though if you look at them independently of each other, you might think they're the same. But it's really interesting to see them side by side. And this is one of those, I just think it's so ugly, but I also would love to have one at the same time. It's just so iconic, such an interesting car. All right, two more. I wanted to throw this one in there. I almost threw in some of the 80s and 90s cars we have in the sale, but I just thought this little Aston Martin was interesting. A DB2/4 Mark III by Tickford, 100 grand to 125 grand. Tell us a little bit about this. We don't have to go in depth. I just thought it was a cool piece, and it's got a really cool interior with some nice patina on it.
Yeah, so it's, this is a great car if you want to go on vintage rallies, do some vintage racing. They have like a pushel cage in the back, or at least a pushel roll bar in the back of it for your 5-point harness. Or sorry, 4-point harness. I don't see
I don't see that center
in the middle.
Yeah,
yeah, I don't see the center strap, the most uncomfortable one. And it's so they hadn't really attended to cosmetics on this in a long time. So the paint's old. It has crazing on it, stone chips and that have been kind of fixed up. But it's just a solid, body on it. Underneath is old, but not crusty or anything. And they had the engine rebuilt on the car. So if you look at it, you open the bonnet and the engine's clean, tidy, new paint, fresh looking, and it runs awesome. I did some videos with this, running it up and down the road. It's in our Detroit office, and it's, runs awesome, stops, starts. It's a fun car. It'd be a lot of fun to take on like a Copper State or, one of those type of rallies, because it has a roof and roll-up windows, so it won't beat you up too bad.
No, it's super cool. I like it a lot. All right, two more. I'm going to go to this 1934 Ford Model 40 Edsel Ford Special Speedster recreation, and I just think this thing's so cool, and it's very historic. And I had seen the real one. Didn't Bill Warner find it in Florida way back when? And so, correct me if I'm wrong, but
we restored it.
Yeah, so this is a recreation of the real thing. But wasn't this where Edsel Ford was trying to infuse some styling into the Ford brand back in the day? And this was kind of a styling exercise. He was kind of maybe leveraging to tell his dad, hey, we got to do something here.
Yeah, we got to make it a little more, make these cars a little more sexy, which I'm sure, Henry was adamantly against.
Right.
All about practicality there, right?
Yeah, so it's a cool two-seater, little Roadster. I don't know I guess you'd call it a Speedster. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so if you ever desired to get, near owning that car, you can't, because it's owned by Ford. It lives, I think it lives in Detroit. It's owned by Ford, and this is, the closest approximation to that car that is available. It's a beautiful design to it. Again, for 34, this is like, you can kind of see where maybe later styling went with other cars, but it's sort of like a very early hot rod, right? And again, it looks more European than anything else that was being built in America at that time.
It's super cool. I mean, it's a recreation, but it's done the right way, and it speaks to some big stuff going on in the Ford company at the time, which is cool. Well, the last car we're going to end on is two reasons. One is it's a Stanley steamer, so my last name. I thought it was cool looking. I'm more curious to find out your history with steamers. Do you like steam cars? Do you drive steam cars? It seems like this is I know the steamer guys are very diehard, right? But what's your history? Do you drive these cars?
So I've never driven one, but I recently took a step into the steam world and now own a 1901 Locomobile, that steam car. Yeah, I've gone completely insane. Can't beat them, join them kind of thing. And I've always loved the idea of like this early alternative power, whether it be electric cars or steam cars and that. I think it's super cool. I've always loved them, but never got to actually drive one yet. And like you said, the group is very supportive. The steam car community, they drive the wheels off their cars. They will use them, do big day and week tours around the US and elsewhere. And there's a really good community for support of how to operate them, how to work on them, what are the fixes, if you have a question about them. It's a really fun group. If you want to get into a very fun but also heavily supported niche in the automobile world, this is a really fun one.
So didn't you just totally skew the age demographic by buying a Stanley steamer at your age?
Oh man, yeah, Haggerty's going to be pissed, So you have to write an op-ed on it. But I love brass cars. I have a 13 Oakland that I drive around. It's a fun thing, but still it's a conventional gas-powered car. But there is a market for these things because you can do something with them, right? That's the biggest thing. Since there's a community that can answer questions, they can make parts, or you can buy parts for them. That's the biggest thing. I didn't, for someone, coming from, say, you're into 50s American cars, and then you say, hey, I want to get one of these, it can be extremely daunting because it's not anything, post-war, or post even,
right. Yeah.
Post 20s, right? It's a very unique thing, but there's such a good group that supports it, and you can do something with it that, makes them, in my opinion, more valuable than something that's just sort of a display piece, right? You can actually go drive it.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, I appreciate it. We went a little deeper in some of these cars than I had planned, but it's all great stuff. Yeah. So I appreciate your time. And so I will be out there. I'm not officially working the auction, but I'm going to be out there running around.
Awesome.
If you need help, let me know. And for our listeners, you can check out the links to all of this information in the show description. And we hope to see you in Hershey. And as always, Jake, thanks for being on the Collector Car Podcast.
Thank you, Greg.